Hey everyone. You know, when I did my package openings yesterday, I talked about in the first one and somewhat in the second one how I feel MLP FIM that the reason people get behind it, that the reason it's broken down its barriers is because when you take a look at all of television today, especially all of the programming we got and that we have, we've gotten and will be getting. Honestly, I think the reason families, adults like myself, male and female, you know, adolescents, college kids, teenagers, and even the intended audience, but beyond that, and with that exception, if you take the intended audience out of the equation, you kinda are left with a group of fans that have an appreciation for something that is not bad. In fact, I believe the reason this fan base has become what it is in the 6 years that the show has been on the air. It's like I said in my package openings. I think it's because with everything we got, we're getting, and we've had, it's the only real decent thing on TV. I mean, it's basically a perfect balance of something for the intended audience, the young girls and boys, but it also has stories and messages that not just stories and messages that not just the younger intended audience can enjoy, but the older audience. Someone that might just sit back and watch an episode just for the heck of it, to see what all the hype is about, can actually enjoy. And when you take a look at some of the stories they've come up with, you wouldn't expect some of the things that they are doing. I mean, you can make certain situations scary at times and threatening, and you can put things into a cliffhanger, but it's all right because it's done in a way that it's not offensive. You don't have any protest. You know, it's just that perfect balance. It's just that perfect balance of just good quality family entertainment, or just good quality animation, good quality entertainment all around. It's just I can't put into words really really what the real core really what it could be, but essentially what I get from it is when you take a look at what the CW is doing with shows, you take a look at what CBS is doing and NBC and ABC. It's like, yeah, some of them do have some decent shows, but a lot of those shows are sometimes getting a little out of hand or a little too complicated even for the adult mind. You know, and then you have reboots or reincarnations of shows, live action or animated, that when you look at it, you ask yourself, why are they doing this? I mentioned the Riverdale uh, series coming this fall on the CW, and a lot of people, even myself, are wondering what are they thinking? This is not Archie. I mean, this is Archie probably because it's based off that new incarnation of Archie comic book series, but it's not the way we know Archie. I mean, basically, this is like you're trying to mix Archie's Weird Mysteries in with Dawson's Creek. It doesn't make any sense. You're trying to make it something that it's not. You're trying to follow a trend that's going to fail miserably. It's like taking something like MLP, FIM, capitalizing on it years from now and saying, okay, we'll turn it into a 1 hour animated melodrama to air on Freeform. You know, you know for certain there's going to be people that'll be angry about that. The point is, when one thinks about it, and one has to just let the brain wrap around why. I mean, I've let my brain wrap around for why for the past 5 to 6 years, maybe even sooner than that, 4 to 6 years. I've let my brain wrap around why, and then it hits me. Like I said, it hits me. Like I said, you take a look at all this stuff that we're getting on cable channels, cable networks, broadcast over the air networks. You know, national broadcast over the air networks like ABC and CBS and all them. And you start to realize there is a reason. And that reason is it's a perfect, like I said, it's a perfect balance. It's something that the whole family can enjoy. I mean, when you have a documentary about the Brony effect and you have a family basically say that they were brought together because they like My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, and you ask why, and them along with everybody from young college girls to young college men to men and women in the military, uh, to people in their 30s or 50s, the 30s to 50s, like me, in that age gap, that age range, and you ask them why, and they give you the same answer. They give you the answer of the reason we like My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. It's overall, it's got a good message to it. Everything is done so well and balanced out so well that it's not overcomplicated. And even if it is, especially for the intended audience, it's not complicated enough to where a young adult or adolescent can talk to them and say, hey, this is why. This is what they're talking about. Can simplify it for them and tell them this is what they're talking about. This is what they mean. It's just that perfect balance to where, you got good characters, you got good stories, you got a good message that overall, episode after episode, whether it's in 2 parts, 3 parts, or whatever, that not just the young kids can learn, the young intended audience can learn and understand, but mostly the adult audience, that Brony audience, that Pegasus audience, that overall audience that it was never really intended for, but has basically broken down that barrier and has basically captured the imagination of, they can understand them as well, and they can even learn from them. And it's still to this day, I know, boggles the mind of how this could be. I mean, because if you're somebody that's wondering, okay, how can this be? How can something that, yes, maybe it is the only decent thing on television right now. Maybe it is the only overall decently produced quality show, animated or live action, that any network or cable channel has to offer. But yet, you say to yourself, if that's the case, but then you think to yourself, okay, I can understand that, but then why are, let's say, the merchandise from clothing to the toys, why are they still in the girl toy section or the girl clothes section, and aimed for that younger intended audience, if not maybe a little older? Why is that still in that position? If if it has such a huge fan base, if it has such a huge broadened fan base, then why doesn't then why doesn't it broaden its expectations outside, merchandise wise, of its intended audience? Because when you come down to it, as good as the show as it is, as decent as the quality of the animation, the character development, the story development, and the overall good good balancing that this show has, at its core, it is still a show intended for young girls. But I think that's what makes it such a pop culture phenomenon. The fact that a lot of these fans, whether they're bronies or they're not, whether they're Pegasisters or they're not, whether they're just fans out of appreciation and respect and nostalgia like myself, or they're fans that have one foot in to being a brony, or one foot in the brony Pegasister area, but one foot still out of it. So kind of half and half, 50-50. You know, even though you're a fan in any of those ways, you what makes you appreciate this show a lot and what makes you realize it's got that good balance is you realize that at its core, it's still a show originally meant for that younger girl audience. And as I was saying, I think that's what makes it a pop culture phenomenon. You know that, but you also realize that sometimes the subjects they talk about, sometimes the story arcs that they do, sometimes the things they can loosely adapt, like A Christmas Carol and what have you, can go over the head of the intended audience, and they may not understand, what they're seeing. They may not understand what, last Saturday's episode, why was a Christmas episode in the middle of May? Or Christmas special episode in the middle of May? Why was that? And why is it called something else instead of Christmas? You see, they may not get that because basically at the basically at that core, or where it's still intended to be a show for young girls, at its core, you also realize that mostly what this show is for those young girls, that intended audience of young girls and sometimes maybe young boys, is it's just a show to sell toys. That's what it is. It's just a show to sell toys. But yet, it's become something more because of the way the characters are developed, the way the story arcs and stories are well written and developed, even the songs, the way they're presented. It basically, in the eyes of an adolescent, of a young adolescent, of a young adult, a college kid with a college girl or boy, a young adult in their 20s to 30s, or an average adult in the 30s to 50s. What makes this show so good and the pop culture phenomenon of probably one of the only shows out there that has a good balance to it is the fact that it allows us to wrap our minds around potential plot holes. It allows us something that, we may be a fan of Law and Order. We may be a fan of Supergirl or The Flash or Arrow or NCIS. And we may want to we may have a tendency to wrap our minds around, the story arcs that are going on for that season and try to figure out, okay, who's going to debut next, or who are they going to try to kill off next? But yet, and it's great, and as fun as that might be, it still overworks our brains more so than we intended. But yet, when you take a look at something like MLP FIM, yeah, you get that same vibe. But you also get a vibe of it opens the door to so many other possibilities. And I think that's why people like it, because they see the potential. They see the potential for other things that could come out of this franchise, this show, for other potential good, decent stories, another good balancing for what is overall a good show. And again, it gets back to that point. It gets back to that point, folks, that the reason I think, well, not that I think, but I believe you have this brony community, the reason you have this Pegasus community, the reason you have a fan base overall, whether they're brony or Pegasus, or they're 50-50, or they're just fans out of respect and appreciation and nostalgia for what this show has done, for the barriers it's broken down, that it just it just opens the door for for many other great possibilities to come from it. You bring in all these references and reboots and retoolings of characters from G1 or G2 or whatever, and they're accepted. People can understand where they're coming from. You get that understanding, and it just works. It really does. I mean, you get your funny moments and you get a kick out of them. You get your funny moments in the show with every episode sometimes, and you get a kick out of them, and you want to rewatch them all the time. I mean, when I look at the first Nightmare Moon episode, the Halloween episode, and Twilight has to tell Fluttershy that it's her, because Fluttershy, before anything else, never really liked Nightmare Night. She opens the door and goes like, "Oh, it is you," and then opens it further and goes, "Oh, Nightmare Moon. Oh, and Nightmare Moon." And as soon as she sees who it is, she's like, closes the door real quickly, and then Twilight has to tell Luna, "Excuse me, what? I'll be okay." Yeah, basically, you have Twilight telling her, hey, telling Luna, "Hey, just one sec." And then you hear a door open, a door shut, and then you hear nothing but uh, squabbling or some kind of roughhousing. You hear a whinny, a horse whinny, if you will, and then you see Twilight pushing Fluttershy out the door, because the reason they went to Fluttershy, from what I understood, is to teach Luna how to speak softly and not so loud and regally. But here's the thing at the core with Luna, and they accentuate that somewhat in the comics from what I've seen, is the fact that that's supposed to be her joke. That's supposed to be her comic relief, that sometimes she'll end up bursting out in a loud royalty voice. And it's things like that you get a kick out of. You really like. I mean, you take a look at Feeling Pinky Keen, and Twilight's wondering what's this thing up with Pinky? Why is she doing this? How is she able to do this? Because every time Pinky gets a feeling in this episode, something happens to Twilight. So you get those kind of moments, and it's a good balancing. You get your sad moments, you get your dramatic moments, yeah, and it's a good balancing. But it's not overly complicated. It's not overly dramatic. It's not overly funny. Basically, it's like I said, it's a good balance of a show, and that's why I believe it. That's why I believe it draws people to it, because like I mentioned, at its core, it's still originally intended for that younger girl audience, or that younger girl, younger boy audience, but yet the stories that they present, the story arcs they present, the character development they present, the references they may throw in, the acknowledgments, the adaptions, the loose adaptions they may do, sometimes that goes over the head of the young kid, because just like with me or anybody else that grew up in the 80s, when I used to watch Transformers originally tended to be one thing, and that was just to sell toys, and it still is to this day. And that it still is to this day. I mean, even with the movies. But you see, the movies are done in such a way and got that PG-13 rating, just like the freaking Ninja Turtle movies do, as of late, that you know it's meant to sell toys, you know it's meant to sell merchandise for the young kids, but yet the story arcs that they will be presenting in these movies and in these shows go over the heads of the kids so much that they won't necessarily get it, and all their mind is focused on is, ooh, I can't wait to get that toy. Oh, I can't wait to get that pony. And that's why I think it's more appreciated by the older adult, the older adolescents, the college-bound kids, the high school kids, the young men and women, those in the 30s and 50s. It's because we know at its core that it's meant we know that at its core is meant to be a show for young kids and young girls and boys, but it's also at its core a promotional commercial. It's just a 22-minute commercial. But yet, we are old enough to look beyond that and say, you know what? There's more than just, oh, it's to advertise a toy and all that. Advertise the next toy coming out or whatever. It's more than that. There's life to these characters. You can connect with. There's more to that. There's more to these characters. There's more to these stories. There's more to this world. And we see that because such a good balance. It's got that good balancing of not being overly dramatic, overly comedic, overly complicated, what have you. It gives us an appreciation for it. Especially like I said earlier, nowadays you take a look at cable channels and broadcast networks and over-the-air broadcast networks and over-the-air cable channels and digital streaming services and what have you, and you notice that, yeah, they may have some decent shows too, but sometimes they might be a little too complicated. Sometimes they might be a little too over-dramatic, too over-comedic, and sometimes they might just be too what's the saying? They might be too overt, if you catch my drift. They might be too out there, too risque, just somewhat of just too much of something that it shouldn't be. And again, it goes back to the Riverdale deal. I mean, yeah, you could do dramatic issues and stuff with Archie. Yeah, you can have him cross over with Predator and Punisher. You could do an alternate timeline where he gets shot and killed to send a message about guns and all that. You could do that, but the thing is, sometimes Archie at his best, Archie at his core, is what makes people appreciate him. You know, Archie was never about sex and drugs or sex and murder and all that, which, like a lot of people point out with this, is that they're trying to do with this Riverdale series. It was never like that. This is basically a mixture of Archie's Weird Mysteries with Dawson's Creek. That's what it is. And when you see things like that get adapted, that are based off beloved franchises that the whole family can enjoy, you wonder to yourself, why? I mean, I have Archie's Weird Mysteries on DVD, the complete series. Do you think I expected a live action adaptation of Archie to be what's being promoted for Riverdale? No. When I saw the NBC made for television movie Archie to Riverdale and Back, or Return to Riverdale, do you think I expected that? Did I think, looking at that, I expect that when they did another live action show, that would be what it's being presented on CW? No. And again, that goes for a lot of the shows in any networks. Yeah, I mean, I know my mom and my family are not the only ones that are wondering when they see the promotions for these new shows like Empire, which is a good show, obviously, or Games of Thrones, or even Riverdale, getting back to that, or Two Broke Girls, or what you name it. Family Guy, American Dad, Simpsons. And they look at the promotions for the upcoming seasons or these upcoming shows and they wonder, what are they thinking? Why would they do this? And then they take a look at something like MLP FIM and they're like, that's good. This is a good show. There's nothing disturbing about it. There's nothing over dramatic about it. There's nothing dark about it. There's nothing overly comedic about it. There's nothing overly complicated. There's no crossing lines, no being risque or anything. No, it's just a perfect balance. Good stories, good characters, and just something for everybody to enjoy. And I think, honestly, in closing, folks, and I know I sound like a broken record throughout all of this, I think that's why people enjoy MLP FIM. And I think that's why I'm kind of in the middle now. Well, I'm kind of halfway in. I have my one foot, one leg halfway in the brony portion of the fan base and one foot out. Because it's still that respect and appreciation for what it's done for breaking down the barriers that it has. And when one thinks about it being that one show that you could just sit back and enjoy, you don't have to watch it all the time to catch up on what's happening. You can. That's why they have it on Netflix. That's why they sell the DVDs. But you don't have to watch the series religiously, daily, or whatever to understand. You can maybe watch 1 or 2 episodes and you would get the picture right then and there of why people like this show. It's just a good balance. There's nothing wrong with it. So, in the end, I think that's what makes it a pop culture phenomenon. It's made it the success it has and why it's broken down the barriers it has. So, that's all I'm going to say, folks. You let me know what you think down below. Give me your reasons as to why you think people have gotten into the show. Do you agree with any of what I've said? I'm sorry this video went a little long, but I just had to get this off my chest. Take care. God bless. I am out.